Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Evangelical Dark Web. Tonight, we're going to be discussing some hot topics. Not necessarily the women involved, but really the contentious tweets regarding Protestia and marriage. But I do think there's a backdrop that maybe set this off, but maybe didn't. And that is like the conservative e-girl drama. And this is, to me, a little bit of... It's a nice way to kick it off because I do think these two issues are very related, conservative e-girl drama, and then the born again virgin stuff that's kind of being peddled in the church under the guise of expiation. Is that the stained glass
Expiation.
expiation of sins? So we're gonna kind of weigh into that, and I'm the married perspective here, and it's kind of hard to there's a lot to get into, but it's kind of hard to be very dogmatic on this subject, and I think that's what, in many ways, is frustrating to many people. So we're going to talk about this, and we're going to start out talking about the conservative ethot battle, which I think is pretty fascinating. I won't get into all the personalities of the e-girls and the ethots of conservative Inc. Maybe not Inc. There may not be Inc. Conservative Inc. because they're not like Daily Wire or Blaze
No, one of
TV
them
or
works at
whatever.
Fox News.
Oh, really? Okay, maybe it is. But again, I'm not super familiar with these people because I don't follow them. I just know, hey, these are con Inc. girls, so just kind of ignore. But
Yeah.
it is pretty interesting that much of this started out because one of them got engaged, and that brought out the cattiness in all of them. So I think that's kind of hilarious. So we'll dive into that. I do want to say, if I appear gassed, I've been working the games at my church's VBS. It's an outdoor VBS, and it didn't rain all week, and that's a real God moment because it rained like everywhere else, but where we were yesterday, and then the last couple of years, like half the nights have been stormed out. So praise God for that. But I'm a little winded. I was destroying some kids in tug of war earlier today. So yeah, it's feats of strength and athletic prowess against little kids. So, but it does take a toll. It does take a toll. So anyway, been training all year for this because it's a big deal for my church. So just a lot of things to praise God for that are going on, and happy to be a part of it. And just want to encourage you to be a participatory member of your local church because I think it's enjoyable and it's rewarding and it glorifies God. So do that. Do that. There's my free advice for the day. Everything else you got to send a super chat for. I'm just kidding. But anyway, all right. First topic. Actually, how are you doing?
No, all good. I guess I've been part of the controversy regarding the OnlyFans girl tweet, and happy to play my part.
I'm doing my part, yes. And I'm trying to be a peacemaker on it. I've thrown some pretty obvious, fastballs down the middle that are super obvious that I think we can all agree on. But yeah, I do think a lot of the pushback against Protestia is valid, and their responses to the pushback have not necessarily been. They don't hold up to the more doctrinal statement that they're trying to be. And I also feel like they're trying to wield in a practical argument alongside a theological argument, but
I mean, there
we need
is
to delineate
there
those.
is goalpost moving, if we're going to be honest. And again, there
So
is some gaslighting as to what they're actually saying versus what the words they actually tweeted are.
yeah, so we'll break that down. I'm sure you have more to say about that because you've definitely read more of the tweets related than I have. So let's first dive into our launching pad topic, and that is the issue of conservative ethos. And I gotta say, this is kind of like the tweet that did it, or maybe not the tweet that. It's not the only tweet that did it, but Sarah Stock, she works with Elijah Schaefer at his latest project, which is Rift TV, and she's one of the people that made her bones and got pretty famous on the Jubilee round table or whatever surrounded. Right? She's one of those people.
Yes,
Uh,
she was, or she elevated after that. But yes, that's basically what catapulted her.
Yeah, and she's done some viral videos herself. She posted a picture of her getting engaged. Congratulations. as far as like conservative girls go, she's the most wife of them all. Am I wrong about
No,
that?
no, she's all right. I don't. Again, I don't follow
She's
women.
pretty and she doesn't have a ratchet history as far as I know. So that like puts her above like all of them.
I,
Especially Laura Southern, who, we're supposed to believe went with Destiny, but did not consent with Andrew Tate, which I don't buy for a second. But, she wrote in a book instead of reporting it to the police. So, that should tell you everything you need to know about her situation. Laura Southern, just to name her again. But Sarah Stock definitely edgier than a lot of the other ones, but she got married, or she's getting married. So congratulations. But not all of the Ethots are very happy about that. Pearl Davis chimed in. Isabella Maria De Luca, who maybe I knew who that is like, that ring is so small. And it's like, actually, if we're going by the diamond size, that's not a particularly small diamond. Uh, I There's a lot as a result. There's this girl, there's the Emily Saves America girl, and there's so many Ethots. It
there's
came out
like
of the
the Maria girl,
woodworks.
and who's
Yeah,
like just throwing grenades. It's
yeah.
hysterical, like about what Emily in Saves America did or did not do in a hotel room at a TPUSA event.
Oh, really? Maybe she
Yeah,
does have a ratchet past, and I'm not aware of this.
no, Emily Saves America, not Sarah Stock.
Oh, okay. So Emily Saves America did some stuff. All right.
Some
Well,
nasty
again,
stuff in
least
a hotel
surprising thing.
room, or had some nasty stuff done to her in a hotel room, I should say.
I mean, I imagine that the TPU is, gross, or as we used to say back in the day, grody. Just to bring up that, 10-year-old slang word. But anyway, there's a lot of this cattiness, and it just goes to show, who's actually conservative on the right in marriage. And most of these influencers, these female ethot influencers, they have messed up personal lives, and they're not exactly models for
They're
behavior and
too.
lifestyle.
Oh, they're too ugly for Hollywood, is the
No,
saying.
no, but odds are they're not. If Zendaya can get
Well,
roles,
fair
that's
enough.
not.
But
But they're not models for behavior that should be followed. And it kind of brings up the subject of like Wary's Law. So there's two parts of Wary's Law. One is that men won't speak out on an issue until a prominent woman does first, which I think is less true than the second part, which is every female influencer is on a trajectory to get more liberal. That's like the second part of it. I'm paraphrasing, of course, but that's the gist of it. I think the second part's actually more true than the first part.
well, the first
And
part really speaks to the boomer mentality. Is that a lot of boomers wouldn't have spoken up on a certain issue until a woman or a minority did it first. Like they love,
maybe minority was also included in Wary's
yes.
Law Part One. Okay,
So
but you're right.
that's why like boomers love the token black conservative. They that's why they're going to be voting for Vivek Ramaswamy in Ohio, even though he has contempt for them. But they're still going to vote for him anyway because it feels good not to be racist.
Right. So, yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. And I think that's kind of gone because you're definitely seeing even people like Pine Sap that are just willing to push the boundaries without waiting for a woman to speak on it first. So I think Wary's Law Point One is going to go by the wayside, but because on the ground level, it's already gone. It's already gone. You're not seeing too many women in the far right circles leading ideological conversations. It's just not really happening. Uh,
No,
but you definitely get a lot of the cattiness, and that's really what most of these women exist to. Even the Melanie Mac person, like they mostly just exist for this cattiness, and uh, even the slop apologetics accounts, like the slop Protestant Catholic apologetics accounts. There's like so many of those that really, a lot of them are e-girls like Farm Girl Lizzie and all that other stuff. So, and the Steve Dace co-host just keeps arguing with them on social media, and it's just, really stupid. It's a bad look to do that, but they can't help themselves. They think they're actually doing something.
but yeah, I'll
But
engage in a lot of debates on social media, but I don't even do the whole Protestant Catholic thing.
I mean, I like
If
to be
anything, I
cheeky and make
gave
jokes,
if
be
anything
creative.
my most anti-Catholics statement was that we shouldn't hold the Pope. Like the Pope said something like moderately good. I'm like, we shouldn't hold. I'm against the anti-Catholic bigotry of soft expectations, and that
I
was
mean, I'm
my
about to
my
throw out
stance.
some anti-Irish sentiment because I think the Irish get too much love. Even though I mean, my hot take is that Italians assimilated better than the Irish because the Irish came and like they stayed liberal. Like the white Democrats are predominantly Irish. Looking at you, Beto O'Rourke, Kennedy family. There's a lot of examples, but the white Democrats primarily, Irish at this point of descent. And, if you look at where the Irish settled in the United States, Northeast, Chicago area, yeah, Italians assimilated better. Just saying. But anyway, uh, with that said, the e-girls, they really just exist to monetize their looks for social media purposes. And that's why I'm calling them e-thots and e-girls kind of interchangeably, because that's what a lot of these people are. And good on Sarah Stock for actually getting married. I mean, I think this would be her first marriage. She seems like she's pretty young. And congratulations on the engagement. Uh that's what they should be doing. But instead, most of them would rather not give up the lifestyle or settle down and find a man. And that definitely leads us to our second topic. So, yes, I'm Italian, so it's awfully convenient for me to say this, but it is true. Like Italian, you'll see a lot more Italians. Like I think New Jersey's shift in the more conservative direction is because Italians are getting more conservative the longer that they're here. And I know there's a lot of Italian last names in Republican politics where I live. So yeah, not as many Irish last names, but or Martin O'Malley, governor of Maryland, Irish. Just saying, the Italians assimilated better than the Irish. But anyway,
There's a Mayor Carcetti joke in there somewhere. Italian mayor on the wire was basically Martin O'Malley, but he was Italian, not Irish.
oh man, but he was played by Littlefinger, who was Irish.
That is true.
Yeah, he was played by an Irish actor, so yeah, it works both ways. So, man, let's go to the Protestia tweet because I believe that is what started this all. They just lobbed a grenade, and I think they lobbed the grenade with a lot of this stuff in the background. And if I can pull up the tweet, because actually I do have one more tweet to show off, and that is I just thought this was a pretty good delivered joke here. From Leonandra. Oh, wait, what? Leonarda Joni, who says a lot of people are placing bets on which e-girl will emerge victorious. Personally, my money is on Nick Fuentes. I thought that was
I mean, he's someone's
that was
girlfriend, I
pretty good.
guess.
That I thought that was pretty good. Anyway, all right, this is from Protestia. Better to marry a former OF model who has come to know the depths of her sin and mercy of the Lord than an unkissed virgin with a haughty look and a proud heart. So I first want to say this is not a false dichotomy because it is not a dichotomy. It's a would you rather. We can at least acknowledge that. It's a would you rather question. And some people get confused by that. But and think that this is a false dichotomy, but it's not. It's a would you rather.
I mean, again, I make, in the article, I write down my reasons. I'm very clear that the virgin is the better choice, all things considered.
And why do you think that?
I mean, again, we can talk about the fact that you, as a husband can lead the virgin in the right direction. And obviously, the marital outcomes of having zero sexual partners supersede that of having multiple sexual partners. So again, the divorce stats are still going to be higher with the OnlyFans model than with the virgin. So again, that baggage stays with you. Like coming in with that sexual history, obviously, people will talk about the kids with the, they'll see the images online, but then you could be dealing with more mental issues in the meantime. So that would be one reason, is that, again, just on the surface, like all things considered equal, the virgin would be better. But I mean, But again, the second reason being that no one actually follows the advice of going for the whore versus going for the chaste woman. It's just like, and again, everyone that is commenting on this in the affirmative, and again, this would be the Protestia people, John Harris would be on there, some of these other guys, and again, all of them, none of, or I should say, none of them actually would have followed that advice and like married it. And even if they say that they might have, I mean, let's just be honest, they didn't, and their successful marriages are kind of proof of that. That they didn't actually follow this advice. And again, a man can lead his woman in the direction towards God. That is still going to happen, even with the haughty virgin. If you actually win her over, then you're actually, it's basically, to quote the great Thomas Accord, it's like taming the shrew.
When I was at
the Shakespeare play.
When I was at the Right Response conference, I met somebody, and he basically said, and this was his advice, and you know what? He's younger on the path than I am when it comes to getting, finding a wife and stuff like that. Or actually, maybe he was whatever. But his advice was, if you can get someone that agrees with you on the gay stuff and abortion, that's someone that you can lead into a, becoming based Christian and traditional. If they already agree with you on those two issues. If they don't, then there's no chance. Even if they claim to be a Christian, there's no chance. If they don't agree with you on those issues, just dump and change.
Now, and keep in mind, when you're talking about marital advice, you are functionally giving financial advice. And again, a marriage is still a financial transaction as much as anything else. And you are functionally leveraging half your assets if it fails. And again, the statistics don't lie. The virgin is less likely to divorce you than the OnlyFans model. And that means you're basically making a huge financial risk if you take the OnlyFans girl. And again, Christians should not be advising other Christians to make outlandish and reckless financial decisions with their money. Again, when I give financial advice, it's like, these are the stocks you should be buying at this time. And again, I've already bought those stocks. I would encourage you to buy those stocks because those are good investments that I myself would be doing.
Right. You're giving advice that you yourself follow.
Yes.
Which is not the case to people who are already married giving a lot of advice like this.
Yeah, like they wouldn't actually follow.
And let me just bring up the thumbnail for this live stream is Nala Ray. And it's not just because I'm rehashing thumbnails because I'm not overly creative with making them, but she is the prime example of this phenomenon of former OnlyFans model coming to Christ and then getting married and stuff like that. And while her marriage is probably legitimate, I do think she's a scam artist. I do think that she's someone who left OnlyFans to find an easier grift, and that was Christianity.
Yeah, I mean,
because people here are trusting, and it's a higher trust environment. So there's an assumption of honesty on her part that might be undue, but then she's doing, she's giving out all these scam courses and just running the OnlyFans playbook and then getting speaking gigs at TPUSA.
Yeah, I mean, she sells life coaching courses on her website. Again, what qualifications does she have for that? None. And again, that's
actually, she has negative qualifications because one of those was a finance course, and she talked about how much she lost all her OnlyFans money and has tax issues. So you have negative qualifications as far as some of your own material goes, and you didn't exactly survive. Is it necessary? Is it helpful for someone who became a drug addict to give advice on how not to be a drug addict? I don't know. It's certainly not helpful for, a stripper to give advice, former stripper to give advice on how not to fall into pornography. I don't see how that's helpful at all. I think that's more of a, someone who's been there and done that can help someone not fall into those traps or set up barriers or, someone who's overcome that, but she's not the overcomer. She was on the other side being a temptress of the vice. That'd be like having a drug dealer. Yeah, maybe more the example is having
the drug dealer go to the AA meeting.
Yeah, to help people stay away from him. It's like, what? Your presence there is actually not as helpful as you think it is. But so, it's kind of like Tony Soprano taking advantage of the one dad that's that wants to gamble but clearly can't, clearly doesn't know his limit. So it's like that.
And
Like you're
again,
going to the wrong guy who think that thinking he'll look out for you. No, he won't.
and not to throw people under the bus, but I do think Protestia was a little soft on this. And again, we've had data since. Like obviously, I think her husband. Again, anytime I've talked about Nala, I've also talked about her husband being kind of a very fringe in his Christian beliefs. He was the type of guy that believed that the not comet the solar eclipse that happened in 2024 was theologically and eschatologically significant. So he was kind of like peddling that John Hagee blood moon myth. And then, so I will actually address that. And then you have the fact that she does do like thirst trap cooking videos, which I mean, I'm just saying, if you're putting flour on your rolling pin, you should not be like making a weird gesture as if you were handling something else. And so again, she gets a lot of passes because people will give a lot more grace to women than they do to men.
And I do think that's a fair critique of the situation at hand, because we're trying to turn a women's issue into a men's issue, and it kind of it's not a practical solution. I don't even think it's a theologically correct solution in this case. So
Now
this is the
let
follow
me
up.
go to my I guess I won't say my third point, but I mean, functionally, if you're dating the Virgin or dating the OnlyFans model, you're basically paying the same price for either. If we're going to be honest, like the guy still has to pay for the date, still has to do the engagement ring, still is basically exerting himself at a greater expense than he would necessarily be receiving from a monetary standpoint. And, not to make it about money, but at the end of the day, you're basically paying the same price for the Virgin as you would be for the used. So brand new versus used, there's no difference in price. And that's the whole what the red pill calls hoflation is basically you have to work 5 times harder for women that are 5 times worse.
Right. And there's a lot going on with the hoflation conversation. We've done a lot of live streams on this.
And again, that has to be factored into the calculation of why the Virgin is still the better option, because you're still paying the same price for either. Go with the newer.
I mean, you could, not to say you can like make snide comments to lower the haughtiness. I don't know. It's like,
I mean, if you just
can you
have,
fix pride?
yeah, it's called having
So,
self-respect and not putting it on a pedestal.
yeah, and actually, you know who the most famous person of putting the P on a pedestal is? And that's Josh Harris. Joshua Harris of I Kiss Dating Goodbye. And he made the ultimate mistake of trying to turn a hoe into a housewife, and it blew up in his face. And they got divorced, and he's like maybe gay now, or just gay affirming, like super gay affirming now. And she's like in her butch lesbian post divorce phase. So yeah, Joshua Harris, big thing in the '90s, big thing on purity culture in general, and he was kind of overemphasized because I don't necessarily think his advice was helpful. I think he was one of the people that had helpful critiques but not helpful solutions, and that kind of showcased itself. And then that whole thing blew up to where he had to keep his grift alive by selling courses just like Nala. Uh, but ultimately, yeah, he tried to turn a hoe into a housewife, and she was an alpha widow, and that hurt them and killed their marriage.
But he had no self-respect. I think that's the flip side. And again, this coincides with other red pill advice where it's just like the guy should just carry himself and not necessarily, I don't say not care what the woman thinks, but at the same time not like care. But like again, this comes down to like political beliefs. Do you actually need like your based right wing babe? No. And you can make the argument of whether a woman truly can be based right wing babe or not. But the point is,
You're not
if
going to find
you're
those in the wild. You're going to have to develop those over time.
well, the idea is that if you don't need to concern yourself with her politics other than maybe she has a good baseline. But beyond that,
Right. And what is that baseline? The gay issue, the abortion issue, and you can choose a few others. But that was, the advice that I heard given at the Right Response conference. This was in conversation. It was not by anyone that was a speaker or anything. And I thought that that was good advice because that would be your baseline for you're not going to find the base girl in the wild because most of the based women out there are probably already housewives or whatever.
Or or they slept with, they were involved with men that that's where they became a little bit more right wing. They kind of learned behavior. Like you kind of want the wife jack meme of your wife asking you, why are people saying 1360? What does that mean? Like you kind of want to have that. Like it's almost endearing.
Yes. Why do you want, or what are all these JD Vance memes like?
Yes, you kind of want that innocence. It's almost desirable, or it is desirable.
No, yeah, because that means they're not necessarily in the fight, which is not really a woman's place to be in the culture war fight. So that's just me
And
being
thus, again,
patriarchal and proud.
she'll become like you politically. You don't need to like have her perfect from day one. Like
Yes,
again,
and that
and
is the point that I really want to drive
or
home.
or if the girl on the internet asks you like, did you vote for Trump? All you have to say is yes. Period. Send.
But I will say this: if you find yourself a Shiloh Hendrix online or in real life, it's not like that might be someone on that level of base might also be super crazy. I'm just saying. Just saying. So we can get to the. This is the follow up tweet from Protestia, and I know this is what you wanted to talk about because this kind of goes more into the
It's
born
kind of
again
the
version
whole
conversation.
it's the explanation makes things worse.
Okay, so I'm largely reading this for the first time. More thoughts on a certain segment of X have come out of the woodwork against in protest of this post, the aforementioned one. God's design for marriage is that it is entered by men and women who have kept themselves pure and have a biblical understanding of they how they to best love and serve their spouse in this area throughout the rest of their lives. Of course, yeah, and amen. And if some Christian man sees a single woman who clearly loves the Lord and exemplifies every praiseworthy feature the Bible lauds, but she has a body count that's been dead and buried with Christ in her baptism, and she wants to pass on that, that's his prerogative. Fair enough. He can do so with a clear conscience. We would suggest, however, but he's missing out. That's not good grammar, by the way.
I'm assuming that it's however that he's missing out.
That he's missing out on a good thing that is more precious than jewels and whose value is far above rubies. The scriptures aren't silent on this. Any man who makes her his wife has found what is good and has received favor from the Lord.
Yeah, I mean, let's just
Okay, if you
stop
want to
there
break there, okay.
because again, when it says that the sins are buried in Christ, the body count is buried with Christ. That's not actually true.
That's true in a
like
that's true in a eternal state sense.
Yeah, but this is where the whole
but that's
born
not
again.
True. Yeah,
this is where the born again virgin myth actually comes from. It's just like, oh well, I'm Christian now, so that means my sins are wiped clean, and my body count is reset to 0. I'm a virgin again. No. Again,
that's not how that
Paul
works.
did not minimize his sin to say that. Well, I'm Christian now, so that means I didn't help kill Stephen.
No, he said he was the worst of the apostles.
Yes, he actually mortified his sin. He actually viewed himself as unworthy. He didn't say I'm worthy now because I'm Christian. He said I'm still unworthy. Like that's the exact opposite approach of what sanctification actually looks like. And again, it's a very low view of what a violation of God's law actually is.
Now, there is a balance here about redemption and stuff that needs to be taken into account. But here's the thing. This kind of strikes me as when John Piper wrote because everything I've read of John Piper just sucks. But this kind of strikes me as John Piper writing that article on how, people want to take the vaccine, but are pressured against taking it in 2021. And it's like you are addressing an issue that no one is talking about. No one is saying that, there's not any of us on the right saying no one can marry these women at all. And we won't allow you to, or we oppose her getting married at all. What we're saying is that it's not expectant that someone should it's not an expectation that one of us take one for the team, so to speak, on a woman like that is the born again virgin OnlyFans to church. There's not an expectation that one person must take one for the team and marry
Well,
her.
but there actually is, like, obviously the guys, the right wing isn't actually saying that, but again, that is the attitude of church dating advice, is that the guys need to step up. And stepping up means you're dating the whorish woman, you're dating the single mother, you're dating the divorcee. That's what stepping up as a man is. It's like, it's being someone's bailout. You're a freaking tarp. And, Congress and the president signed it, and, there you go. You're bailing out the bank, except instead you're the bank that's bailing out the woman. And it's just like, I don't like the idea of reducing marriage to being someone's bailout.
And yeah, you have a more financial view of looking at this.
Well, yeah.
So the real would you rather is former OnlyFans girl or stay single. And I think that's a good way to put it because and although you went above and beyond that and said, statistically speaking,
Yeah.
there's more to work with
The haughty
a
virgin.
virgin that is maybe struggles with the sin of pride.
Yeah, again, you could actually do I won't say the Jesus juke, but like the all sin is pride juke. You could actually do that and say that all sin is pride, so therefore the comparison is moot. That everyone's sinful nature is inherently rooted
And
in
if
in
they're
pride.
like Nala or else that got some filler put in and all ugly tattoos or whatever, just saying that stuff is permanent. Or are lip fillers maybe that's not permanent, but definitely
I
tattoos
don't want to
are.
know. I don't even want
I
to know.
don't want to know whether lip fillers are permanent or not, but yeah, I've definitely seen some older women that have lip fillers in, and it kind of looks weird. So, uh, does the former OF girl keep the money she's made? Now, here's the interesting thing: most of them don't make any money on it, and that's like I don't want to not sadder, but it's more pathetic. I'm actually happy that most people don't make money doing this, and they can't capitalize off they don't successfully capitalize off the Indian market because I
Or
largely think that the third world.
the Canadian immigration market.
Yeah, I largely think that the third world is what drives a lot of that OF success. Uh,
And believe it or not, it's also like these are like Gen X and Boomer types. It's not like the
but
guys under 30 being the
let's
primary
let's also
users.
talk about who Protestia is talking about. They're not talking about. Uh, there's a lot of dudes in the church that maybe have rough pasts themselves that would actually, because of that commonality, be just as rough around the edges, and that would actually make them more suitable. They're talking about young men that have
This,
not strayed from the way, must therefore take up the burden, and you put it as being someone's bailout. And I do not blame young men for not viewing former OnlyFans women as not part of the unmarriageable for them. And I think a lot of this is Protestia and JD Hall specifically is about whether they're marriageable at all. And how much of this is a personal diagnosis of this, like they're not marriageable, my opinion, versus they're completely unmarriageable and must be single forever.
I mean, again, to quote the great play Hamlet, "Get ye to a nunnery" is the line that Hamlet says to Ophelia, and that's implied that they had obviously been fornicating. And he tells her to get to a nunnery. So a lot of nuns might have actually have been, let's just say, former, hoes themselves.
So moving on in the post, some have asked, how would you feel if your son brought home a repentant and redeemed ex OnlyFans model? And their answer is overjoyed, ecstatic, thanking God that my son would find a woman whom Christ has shown great mercy. I would do all I could to make her feel welcomed, accepted, and loved. I would love to have her as a daughter-in-law and would never for a moment feel ashamed of her or that she is undeserving of my son. He and I would certainly talk later about the unique challenges of the relationships would bring and areas that they would have to navigate as a couple. There almost certainly will be some trials and tribulations other couples will never have to know. But Christ covers all that. There's some grace for that, especially if both of them have deep understanding of how much they deserve death and damnation for their sins and how good God is that he saved them from it. So I do think, uh, yeah, here's the thing. Let's just do a little bit of if the roles were reversed. Can we
Well,
play
can
that
we
game?
actually first say that that reads like a Gospel Coalition article at the very end?
You're not wrong. It does read like Gospel Coalition.
Like again, I take a very broad view of the fifth commandment, given that all authority on earth is tied into it. So, yeah, I would say that the parental approval is requisite for a proper marriage under the fifth commandment,
Yeah.
and that's also inside. That's also incorporated into the traditional like wedding liturgy, where it's like whoso gives this bride to be wedded this day. It's the husband that says I do.
No, the
So,
father.
oh, sorry, yeah, the father does that. So again, that's again enjoined into the fifth commandment. It's not just there to be there. It's actually rooted in liturgy. But yeah, I mean, yeah, if anyone should be most scrutinous of like their children's marital prospects, it should be the parents.
So let's play a little game of if the roles were reversed. So I have daughters, so I can relate to this. Yeah, let's say that there's a former offender of the sexual variety who has come to know Jesus. He is on the registry lifetime. Is there any circumstance in which I would say he can marry my daughters or daughter? No, I'm sorry. That no, no, no. That's a no for me, dog. He might be a better fit for the former OnlyFans model, but that's not a fit for my daughters. And as a parent, some people are like, "Oh, how dare you would have you would even dictate that of your children?" Like, well, not all of us are raising feminists here.
But again, it's also just a low view of marriage and again a low view of the fifth commandment, where a parent has the right to say no. You don't have the ability to come into the family. Like that's actually the historic view. It's not marriage is this romantic affair like how we romanticize like Ruth and Boaz. It's no, that's entirely a patriarchy. Like, yeah, obviously there's love, but it's a patriarchal love. It's a love rooted in duty, in obligation, in honor culture. Not, this amorous, romantic affair that slowly budded into like a marriage. Because technically, Boaz would have let her go to the first in line for the kinsman redeemer rather than take her for himself.
No, I think he purposely sabotaged that with the kinsman redeemer or the first in line. Like
Yeah.
he kind of sabotages that with a little bit of pointed honesty, but he did want
Well,
it for
he
himself.
buttered him up and then was just like, however, you have to take in the mother.
Yeah. Well, and that's so it seems like it's his idea to pass on it. It was shrewd. It was shrewd. Uh, so yeah, this tweet by Protestia I just don't see as helpful because for me, if the roles are reversed because I don't have a son, no, that's a no from me, dog. Would I let my daughters marry Andrew Tate if he reformed and became a Christian? No, absolutely not. Beat it. Get out of here. No. Sorry. No, no, no. Not happening. So what exactly is the point here? Because and we can extrapolate this. If someone's on the registry, I don't think they can really be a pastor, regardless of how long they've been a Christian and stuff like that. There are some consequences of temporal sins that follow you even beyond uh, salvation and stuff like that. Like you cannot salvation does not give you a get out of jail free card from earthly consequences. It does for heavenly consequences, which is more important, but the thief on the cross knew he was worthy and deserving of death, and he did not contest his sentence on the cross. So there is a sense in which it is delusional to think that someone who's done these was an OnlyFans model, or I really should say OF because of YouTube, but there is a sense in which doing OF, having a super high body count makes you undesirable as a match. And I might caution against the person that thinks that they are super desirable because of that, because there's maybe some dude out there might be a little pervy and thinks that, oh, they're reformed now, they'll be super good, and they probably know what they're doing in a certain situation, and might get themselves into a trap because they're none the wiser, and maybe uh, thinking with their PP instead of thinking with their head. So there's a lot of factors at play here, and wisdom and prudence matter. So that's what my first take on this was, or maybe it wasn't my first take. It was definitely the take that I gave about, I would not marry my daughters off to that, and I don't even think that is remotely controversial. And I don't think it's wise to encourage men to lower their standards in marriage, and that is what I think Protestia was somewhat doing. They were encouraging men to lower their standards in marriage.
And again,
And I don't think we have to do that.
they did try to say, "Oh, we're not telling you you have to do this." Well, and again, it's twofold. One, you actually did the whole "it's sinful to want the haughty virgin," and that you're wrong for wanting the haughty virgin, rather than doing the whole "would you rather" game. So they did explicitly condemn anyone who opposed them on that. And two, they did technically say that you're missing out on something that on basically a Proverbs 31 situation, which that's actually selling the idea that you should. That's a sales pitch of, well, I understand you have the right to pass and say no, but you could be missing out. So you are actually trying to sell the idea. So don't act like you're not trying to sell the idea or encourage men to do this.
Yeah, I mean, I think Stormy Squad brings up a good point. The guy thinking with his PP is deluded because former actresses have their drive completely destroyed. They don't enjoy it at all. Yeah, I think there's something to that. Like, yeah, the person who did it for a living, former hooker or whatever, they probably view it as work, just like anything else that you could do for work. I don't know how, as a guy, not sure how you could just view that as work. Oh, I have to do this again. No, that's a pretty foreign thought for a guy. But for a woman, not a necessarily foreign thought, especially if they were an actress, because that's really what that industry is about, is selling enthusiasm and interest and stuff like that, which, your sex-hating feminist is not about doing. So, yeah, I suppose you could wind up in that type of situation, especially if this person was, feminist deluded to thinking that this was empowering and then realized that it wasn't empowering. Yeah, you're absolutely right that, yeah, they could think that it's going to be a lot better than it actually is. So yeah, don't just think with your PP, and think with more than that. So, yeah, and here's the thing. They're encouraging men to lower their standards, but this is only advice for men for a problem that's largely not driven by men. I think the problem is in the marriage crisis in the United States and largely the world, is that there are more marriageable men than women, and I think every statistical category bears that out.
Now, keep in mind, if you just want one statistic that actually like is the tell-all, it has to do with the fact that there's a 12% higher margin between single men who want children versus single women who want children. Like a 12% margin on that. Like that is insane. The idea that women just don't want children. And I think it's 45-57, so 57% of men want children. That's nearly 60%, nearly 6 in 10. 45% of women, so it's not even 50%. Like if you just want what is the one catch-all statistic that, more marriageable men than marriageable women, I think that kind of is it. Because it's saying that like men actually aspire something and that women don't. And like, let's be honest, as Matt Walsh kind of like argued this past week, is that child rearing is actually a duty for that women have to society. And again, that's very consistent with Christian thought of, I would say, most of the major camps. I mean, technically that is in the Westminster Confession, where it argues that marriage is for the purpose of marriage is in part for the procreation of Christians. So the idea that you are procreating future believers in the church. So that's a duty towards God.
And that's called wombfare. It's just one aspect of spiritual warfare is wombfare. Like the idea of winning in the womb, outpopulating the heathens and stuff like that. And that is one reason why Christianity, we have a long game here in the United States because of the collapsing birth rate crisis. Christians have a long game because we already have a culture in the United States where Christians have large families. Like that's already built in. You go to a lot of, one sign, I heard it said one sign of a healthy church is how many like super long vans there are. So, homeschool vans, you know what I'm talking about? So that's one sign of a healthy church. And I think that's actually a pretty good sign, if you're looking on the outside of a church, what's the sign that it's healthy? It's like, yeah, the homeschool vans. So with that said, there's a long game, but here's the thing. Uh, Biggest issues with that long game, because it's not like Christians haven't been out populating non-Christians for decades, but they've been, the public school system and then feminism and stuff like that. So to me, as a dad, I'm not saving up for kids to go to college. I'm just not my interest. And stuff like that, because you send kids off to college, they go super liberal. Even if the best of, like you're starting to see like sorority culture videos come out right now. It's like, okay, I guess that's the best of, normie, normie culture that we can
It's a
ask
little
for, but it's,
barstooly.
yeah, but it's like, okay, at least that's a little bit better. I'm sure like the pink-haired feminist, or sorry, blue-haired feminist, are going to be very mad looking at videos of pretty young women
Yeah,
doing
I,
sorority
I am
things.
kind of conflicted because obviously it's it's a little I don't say promiscuous, the whole
It's
damn
there's a certain
thing.
immaturity about it, but it is
And
also girls
the
acting their
second the second
age.
the second issue being they're probably taking out student loans to do that. So we're just
Yeah, I
compounding two
mean,
issues, one completely separate from the marriage crisis. But yeah, so there's that, and that the other day, yeah, it's like beauty, it's positive aesthetics, and again, it makes our enemies mad. So it's like, I'm gonna stay out of this and stay neutral, and just kind of
yeah,
let it happen. Kind of like with the Sydney Sweeney ads.
yeah, and here's the thing about Sydney Sweeney. Didn't she turn down and end an engagement because she didn't want to settle down? Isn't that part of her backstory right now? Like she recently got engaged and then like called it off because she didn't want to get married. She wasn't about that, which very unfortunate. But for her and the guy that tried to wife her up,
He shot a
Ver
shot.
he shot his shot and ultimately backfired, and that sucks. But ultimately, hope he finds someone that is gonna actually be the Proverbs 31 woman, assuming that he's a Christian and wants that. So, with that said, yeah, men should not necessarily lower their standards, but here's the other thing: no one's telling women to lower their standards at all. Like
Or
this
no, come
conversation.
back to earth. Come back to earth. We're not even talk. We don't even do. It's not about your standards being too high. It's just like they're not even on the right planet.
Now, is that necessarily true? You're being hyperbolic for effect, but there is something about the marriage crisis. Largely, hopeflation's a huge part of it. I think you also used the term ghettoification of women in the past.
Yeah, I have.
Uh, so where the worst aspects of black rap culture are being internalized by white women. So it's like, okay, now everything's going to hell. And then of course, if you work in certain industries, if like waitresses and stuff like that. I worked at a restaurant, and there was a period in time where there was continuously always someone getting pregnant. And yes, it was basically all single mom situations. None of them were married or anything like that. It was basically, pregnant, pregnant, pregnant. And I was dating my wife at the time, and I'd say, guess who's pregnant? And yeah, that seems to happen when women enter their like upper 20s. They just get pregnant. Uh, and no amount of promiscuity prevents that from happening. So, long story short, even if there's a lot of women that don't want to have kids now, a lot of single women that don't want to have kids, uh, you know, birth control pills don't really work and still happens. So, maybe there's hope if but obviously you shouldn't marry someone that's not interested in
But then
having
again, you're
kids.
talking about
But I
men.
am saying, if you already find yourself in that situation, birth control pills don't really work and you can just tinker with that. Anyway, uh not advice. Not advice. I'll get to some questions if anyone has any questions. But yeah, is it already over, bros? And no, we don't black pill around here because I think the future is for the taking, especially if we can, if we win on immigration during this Trump term, like that will set us up for a broader future. You're already seeing Republicans say, well, it's like no more racial gerrymandering, even though like racist gerrymandering is like the only way that to do it fair is to be completely racist. And they're like, no, we're not going to be completely racist. And that makes Democrats very mad, apparently. And so
Yeah, you actually
the
have.
Democrats have gerrymandered all they could, and the Republicans haven't because they've had to respect racial boundaries. So it's going to be very interesting. The future is on our side, and maybe we'll get to that in a second because I did also want to talk about the Elon Musk surrendering. But I think liberalism has reached its peak in the United States, and it's time to. We're going to be entering in a post-liberal era, but we are in the fight now. We are in the thick of the fight. We are born in such a time as this, and a very critical moment in Western history is when we are born. So, saving the West. That is kind of what we are all here for. This is the time to be saving the West.
No, CJ Angle says we're repealing the 20th century.
So, definitely send in your questions, but ultimately, yeah, I did want to also say because I posted something. I'm trying to be agreeable even with the Protestia people because there's some things that they are saying, there's some things they're not saying, but they're not necessarily being edifying. In my opinion, I don't think that those tweets are necessarily edifying because it kind of goes back to the John Piper analogy that I made earlier, where I'm comparing it to the John Piper article about, if you're a Christian that wants to take the jab but is being pressured not to, like that was not necessarily a real scenario. In this case, the Reformed, and I don't mean reformed meaning soteriology. I mean like reformed like from their previous lifestyle. Only OF girl, who's all of a sudden super virtuous in the church. I'm not like, where are the examples of that? Like, this is a hypothetical that largely doesn't exist,
But
which is
again,
unfortunate. But
you do hear it as like the Christians need to step up and take on the risky option. Like you need to step up and take on this really undesirable like prospect.
and I've talked before about, yes, marriage is a risk that men should take because you know being willing to take risk is part of being a man, but there are stupid risks as well. Like, I'm not saying to be stupid. I'm not saying to choose the wrong person. It's very important to vet who you marry. So, uh, let's see. Someone said that Sydney Sweeney is an op. You know, I, let's see. Question: I was raised non-Christian, fairly recently converted, very new to Reformed theology. Any recommendations on where to start? That's a good question. I'll let you take that because
Um, I mean, again, if you want to go more into Reformed theology, I would just recommend something by R.C. Sproul. I mean, I'm not going to tell you to dig into Calvin's Institutes, even though that would be a very systematic theology book, but it would also give you a lot of polemics on like Catholic stuff, which probably not really best for the beginners. But I would start with something by like an R.C. Sproul or maybe like a Reformation Heritage.
Calvin's
Uh,
Institutes.
I wouldn't go there for a start, but or maybe just get like a good study Bible because that'll help you.
Okay.
But
Uh,
yeah, R.C. Sproul would be a good author to see what his
do you
works.
think the whole Protestia controversy, and I'll correct your edit, is two sides talking past each other, both being too extreme? So let me. There's something else that I wanted to bring up here, and that is whether I do think there's a little bit of this because first they're making theological arguments about expiation of sins, and then second, there's a practical argument. Hey, we got a birth rate crisis here in the United States. There are more men than women, so some people are going to have to settle. I don't want to say, practically speaking, you're not going to find a whole lot of versions out there. Is basically the gist of it. Although at least in other countries, it's like, yeah, one of the most third world things that I read was like, yeah, didn't you everyone lose their V card when they were by the time that they were 13? It's like no, in first world countries, we're not molested by uncles and stuff, but yeah, there's a little bit of that, but what they said was not. I think it was not edifying. I think it was not speaking to the problems that are being faced in the church by young men. Like it is not a solution to say, hey, this woman that's everywhere is all of a sudden in your marriageable pool. Uh, I get that, the virgins will be fewer and farther between than they used to be. There's a realistic expectation about, okay, she had a boyfriend for 2 years and that was it or whatever versus, she went to raves and got
She's on
plugged.
video and like having a train ran on her.
Yeah,
Like
yeah. There's a huge difference between,
she rode the carousel in college versus she just had a boyfriend. Like there's a huge difference.
yeah, yeah. There's a huge difference between long-term relationships slept with and fornicated versus, uh,
Her phase.
yeah, hoe
Like
phase, merry-go-round, or
Village
roulette wheel.
Bicycle.
Yeah, there's a huge difference between this. So
But again, it does point
I
to
think
just
Protestia maybe was trying to treat one as the other, and I'm not saying that men. Look, there are ways to have standards that are both biblical and realistic. That's something that has to be balanced. So, with that said, and I posted this as well, and I also equate body count to obesity because me personally can't do it. Nope, nope. Uh, Not an issue in my house, but anyway. Uh, and being a Christian is like a starting point for qualifications for someone who's marriageable. It is not the ending point, and it is not. It does not mean that every single girl out there is marriageable to you. You are allowed to have reasonable scruples. Now, for men, yeah, the body count thing is really a big deal, and so also is weight. Uh, because I think most women that are single in the church, that would be the biggest reason why. Uh, is that so?
yeah, I mean, again, I guess I take more of the view that almost attraction kind of just comes first because, and age also. Let's be honest, like it doesn't necessarily matter how Christian someone is. Like if I'm not dating a 35-year-old woman, like, I'm not dating someone that's like over 5 years older than me. It's just like no, 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 not happening. Like I don't care. Like if she's this devout woman, I'm not even denying it, but I'm also not marrying it. Like so again, there are factors that really just come before even just like whether like that would be prerequisite to whether you would even want to vet their faith through meeting them and getting to know them. Like I think, and again, I'm a fan of the hot holy matrix, which actually puts it on a graph of attraction and holiness. So I think that's the better model is that you're not actually contradicting like people's desire for attractive women, but you're actually like conforming to it and making it more aspirational that you should desire a holy woman that is also beautiful. And again, most of the people that are telling these dudes to consider the OF girl they followed the hot holy matrix, even if they didn't know about it, even though it wasn't even a thing.
I'll also say that most OF girls are not actually hot. They're just,
Yeah, they're
they
like,
just took, like, there's hot, and then there's, you had to take your clothes off for me to lust after you hot. Like, there's a huge difference between someone being beautiful without having to do that, and then someone having to present themselves nearly or actually naked in order to be considered attractive. Like, there's a huge difference between that. And then I also say, a lot of those types love doing ugly things to themselves. Not a fan of piercings. Not, the septum piercing is all the rage to make fun of these days, and for good reason. Or super dyed hair. I like natural hair color. Yeah,
yeah, septum
that's
piercings are no go because it is a sign of feminism and a lack of intelligence. So it's a no go zone.
so. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Let's see. The problem is that and this is from Caleb. The problem is that this is framed as men having to take on a huge burden in marrying a hoe, while women aren't expected to hold themselves to any standard whatsoever, while demand perfection.
Yeah, and
Yeah, yeah.
that is kind of hypocrisy because again, obviously we can do the whole if the roles were reversed, and again, let's even just do the whole if the man had a high body count. Like, let's just be honest with ourselves that women don't actually care about that as much, and let's be honest, a lot of women kind of like that. They kind of like the idea of desire, like women desire a man that another woman desires. It's kind of like, they want what other women have or what other women want.
Are AI wives, girlfriends about to decimate the birth rate even more? I actually think no. So I actually think, robots would actually improve the birth rate to some degree because they would, first of all, take away a lot of jobs,
Basically,
women job, a lot of women
AI
jobs.
gets the OF, shuts down the
I
OF
think it
model
also
as far as
brings
this
down the
goes.
price of sex. So if you have robots that can replace many functions of a wife,
I mean,
then women
what?
will actually probably, like, I don't want to say be easier, but it will actually lower the price of, like, because
Yeah,
there
but
is there is an economic component to, you know, if sex is super free, then marriage is lower and stuff. There's something that there's a point that I'm trying to make that I can't fully articulate right now. But my point is that if, like, women in household roles are actually replaced by robots, then women as a survival mechanism will try to be wifed up sooner so as not to be replaced, or they'll just use a robot to as a robot wife and all that. But I don't think that that is a natural solution to the problem. So I actually think it is possible that this introduction of a potential competitor to the female psyche will result in higher birth rates, actually,
I mean, there is a
because
sense
the
that
women will do what the robots cannot, and that they'll have to work at doing what the robots cannot do, which ultimately, one part of that is making babies. A robot cannot bring that fulfillment, even if a robot can cook, clean, or anything else. And I think that that could be a wake up call.
I mean, there is a sense that women will want to be where the men are, even though they'll like want the men to approach them, but they still want to be like they'll still kind of like want to put themselves in that position to be seen. I mean,
So this came up. There's a viral video lately where the one girl's complaining about not getting hit on at a bar or whatever, and it's like the first step in, like, getting hit on. Like,
this eye
yes, it's the
contact.
no, like, it's men are supposed to pursue, but the woman has to, act. I don't want to say act like a wounded animal, but, like, they have to be participatory in the game. Like, you can't just have a don't even talk to me or I'm gonna blow a whistle so that everyone that make a scene if you even try to talk to me. Like, they just have a button that says do not talk to me at all. But there has to be a dying, wounded animal, come hunt me type of thing going on, where it's like, do approach me. Like, the woman has to
Be inviting and
be approachable. Like, that's the first step, and then the men will pursue. So that's kind of how the dating game has always worked. But when the first part was shut off, Then the second part got broken, like the game got broken because women, in some ways, in many situations, the rules got changed where you can't approach women in the workplace, or school became a little bit more taboo, but school is probably the best place you can still approach women. And then, unless you're a teacher, anyway, yeah. So the whole mating ritual got broken by the first part being taken away, and that is the approachability factor. And then we got some less serious questions. Will Funko Pops be banned under Christian nationalism? I'm gonna say no because I'm gonna allow them. Maybe Labubus would be the bigger issue at the moment. So
Yeah, I actually heard the term labubu in the real world this week, and I kind of just I didn't say anything, and but I was mentally shaking my head.
hey, Protestia, welcome to the stream. I mean, but anyway, I think we had some friendly disagreements with Protestia, but I do think some of what they said, there is a validity to what there, and I think JD Hall was trying to make a more practical argument. So we can still have standards, but if you don't want that, don't. And I won't say you're missing out. I'm just saying I won't.
Well,
But
I do want to see this one. Jake Greening Ministries late to the conversation, but I have to ask: is it possible co-ed
young adult
young
groups,
adult groups aren't helping?
it's interesting.
Um,
My church does this. I went to it recently because they're kind of off their cycle. Like they're not like meeting regularly, so I decided, okay, I'll check it out once. And they have like two different young adult groups because it's just so large that they split it between like, and I guess I'm still young enough to be in like the career, like there's career and family, and then school and career or something like that. They split it up like that because it was a large group. Like there's a lot of young people at my church, and it's not one of those seeker sensitive churches. Like it is very, yeah, it's kind of an odd phenomenon, that my church is has a lot of young people, young families as well. So, and one of the exercises that was done was kind of like a focus group, divided into focus groups on marriage and stuff like that, what you want in a partner. And I was kind of surprised that none of the women who were married cared at all about career and stuff like that, whereas the women who weren't married were more inclined to care about career. So I don't.
their own career,
Yes,
or someone else.
yes.
Well, again, that's really a lot of the marriage crisis is that women are again even in the church are taught to be more career minded than family minded, and their value really their utility
Now that could
comes.
have just been that was a focus group, but that could have just been driven not by all of the girls in that group, but a minority, or like one person
So
wanted that on the
the
list.
loud mouth made it the
I, I'm
formal
I'm just
position.
saying that might not have spoken for everyone, but it was kind of interesting. Although most of the single girls in that were like young single, so it was kind of weird. So I'm not sure what to think about all that. Uh, so those are my thoughts. So the long way to say is the young co-ed young adult groups aren't help. Based on my own experience, I have no reason to think that it's not helpful. So long-winded way to say that.
I'm neither here nor there on it. Like I was in one, but I'll be honest, I'm not going to say I was getting a whole lot out of it. So, but obviously I switched churches, so that's a different story in itself. But yeah, I'm not going to pretend I was like getting a whole lot out of it, and that's not to say I didn't like the people, but I don't know.
You didn't find a wife in there.
I mean, yeah, we could say that, but
Anyway, great questions.
but I mean, yeah, there is something to say about it's. I imagine it's very hit or miss, and obviously it depends on the quality of the church.
Yeah, I mean they're doing a systematic theology in my church, I believe. But over the summer they're doing marriage conversations because they're trying to, the pastor who actually runs it is trying to address practical issues. and the marriage crisis is one of them. So that's all we got for tonight. My name is Ray Anthony. This is the Evangelical Dark Web. Have a blessed day. Stay based. Christ is King, and we will catch you on the next one.